The DBR podcast is sponsored by Byrd Campbell, a Duke-centric law firm. Lawyers by vocation, but Duke grads by the grace of God. Founded by former Duke roommates Jamie Campbell and Tucker Byrd, they say, go Duke or go home. Hey, Duke fans, and welcome to issue number 87 of the DBR Podcast. I guess it's an issue. It's episode number 87 of the DBR Podcast. I am Jason Evans. I'm your host this week, and unlike most weeks, I am not joined by two compadres. Only one of my buddies could be here. Sam Klein in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Sam, how you doing?
I'm good. I think that whether it's an episode or an issue is entirely up to you because you are the host.
Thank you very much, sir. Donald Wine, who is usually with us, couldn't make it because Donald is busy traveling with Team USA, the soccer team, as they go to Trinidad and Tobago to qualify for the World Cup. Donald, as most of you know, is probably the biggest USA soccer fan that there is. Sam, am I right about that?
I mean, certainly one of the most prominent.
Yes, yeah, he is. He's featured in commercials and stuff like that. He leads the cheers. He is a huge fan. And so he can't join us this week. But because he couldn't join us, we had to get one more voice. We had to get one more person to be on the podcast this week. And that person is Mason Plumlee. Yes, folks, you heard me right. Now, I'm not going to pretend like Mason is joining us for the entire podcast. What happened is a couple days ago, I arranged to have a conversation with Mason. We recorded it. He knew we were recording it. It wasn't surreptitious or anything like that. So we were going to kick things off this week with our conversation with Mason Plumlee out of Denver. Like Sam, he's in Denver. And here's the interview I had with him just a couple days ago. All right, so Mason Plumlee, thanks so much for joining us here on the DBR podcast. We're all big fans, and congratulations, by the way. You just signed a 3-year, $41 million contract with Denver. I have to ask, was that nerve-wracking at all? I mean, it happened kind of late in the free agent process. Was it hard to spend all summer sort of waiting for this life-changing money?
Yeah, I mean, it was free agency is a very different experience. Really, you get drafted as a rookie and you know what the pay scale is before you come in, but the business side of things can get interesting, that's for sure. And it took a little longer than I thought it would have initially, but I'm happy with the result and glad to be back in Denver.
So I noticed that you will make more this coming season than Miles makes. Did you let him know that?
Well, I guess for a season, but I think all told, his contract is bigger than mine. But like you said, it's life-changing money. So at the end of the day, we're all very happy here.
Yeah, the NBA has been good to the Plumlee family.
For sure.
So can I ask, do you get any good jokes? Does anyone talk about there being 3 Plumlees in the league? What's sort of the funniest side of that?
Well, I mean, I think before us, the Berry brothers all played in the league. I know now everybody is anticipating the Ball brothers playing in the NBA, but it is interesting, like looking at how many. There are also a ton of twins in the league. You look at the Morris twins, the Lopez twins. There are a lot of brothers in the NBA. The Collins, I played with Jason Collins for a season, so there's a lot of families spread across the league.
Was there a moment when you were in the NBA when you kind of, probably during your rookie season when you went, oh my gosh, I'm not in college anymore. This is a whole different sensibility. Talk to me a little bit about that moment and what it's like, the difference between being at Duke and being in the NBA.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that moment came for me in training camp. My rookie year, I was drafted to the Brooklyn Nets, and we had at the time, it was the highest payroll in league history. We had a bunch of Hall of Famers. We had All-Stars. Our team was just loaded, and Billy King was our GM, so we actually went down to Duke for training camp. So the guys were, giving me a hard time, had me running a lot of errands around Durham. But we had our first practice, and I was so, I'd been working out for the whole summer getting ready for training camp because, I was like, I'm going to have to go in here and prove myself, even though I was drafted in the first round. Like, I know I'm starting at the bottom, but I didn't really realize how far the bottom was because we had our first 2 practices, and they didn't even let me sub in one time. So, like we had, I think in my position, we had Kevin Garnett, Brooke Lopez, Andre Blatch, Reggie Evans, Andre Karolinko, and then Paul Pierce played some forward, Joe Johnson played some. So we were just so loaded. And I was like, I was just so excited to start my NBA career in the first training camp. And I remember I didn't break a sweat my first 2 days of practice. And I was like, all right, there's definitely a pecking order here.
So talk to me a little bit about your goals and what you hope to accomplish. Aside from winning a championship, everyone wants a ring. What do you want your legacy in the NBA to be?
My legacy, like you said, winning is big. I felt fortunate to be on a state championship team in high school, a national championship team in college. So to be on one in the NBA would be probably the most meaningful. But, my personal goal is to just be a player that made his teammates better, somebody that people love competing with, somebody that you want on your team in a big game, in tough times throughout the season. The NBA season is so long. You definitely figure out a locker room, like who you want to be in that locker room when you're going through a tough stretch, because every team goes through it. Some last longer than others, but I think that really shows who you are in those times. And I want to be one of the guys that people were glad was on the team for that, for the good and the bad.
I want to ask about your family just for a little bit. I mean, obviously, all 3 brothers played at Duke, and you guys are sort of legends around the program. I've got a question. Tell me something that Miles and Marshall can do better than you. Is there anything they do better than you?
Yeah, there's plenty. The video games. So like when we had that one year where we were all together. Miles was the senior. Marshall was a redshirt freshman. I was a junior, and I used to go over to Miles' dorm, and they'd just be playing video games, and they're so good that I could never really get in the game. But
what games do they play? What are they specialists at?
So during that time, Call of Duty and Zombies was like the big game, and they're pretty good at it, and that game can go on for a long time. So they'd be sitting there for hours at a time. But any of the role playing games, any of the I don't know. The only video game I'm really good at is NHL or FIFA. So other than that, they've got my card.
I have to wonder, how big is the Plumlee family Thanksgiving turkey? I mean, are you guys? You must consume tremendous amounts of food. How would your parents possibly afford that?
It's like what do they call it on the NFL? A turducken? What's that? Where they stick something inside? Yeah, that's what we need. No, we have big meals, but it's hard anymore to get the family together because we, sometimes I've had games on Christmas Day. I know some guys play on Thanksgiving or we're on the road, so we don't get together as much anymore. But when we do, we definitely eat good.
Over the summer, are you able to see each other? Because I mean, obviously during basketball season, everyone's in different cities and the such.
Yeah, and I was, we all 3 this last summer we spent in New York together. Marshall was still in Westchester, and then me and Miles just rented in the city. But another fun thing is, K Academy goes on, and we always meet back at Duke for that, and that's a good way to connect, not just with each other, but with the other guys too.
Which member of the family, which one of you guys misses Durham and misses Duke the most?
Misses Duke the most? I would say, man, that's tough. I would say myself, but if I had to, besides myself, I would say Marshall, because Marshall spent 5 years there, so he got 1 extra year. Gotcha.
All right, so a couple questions specifically about Duke and your time there. You only averaged 14 minutes a game and 3 points a game as a freshman. What was that frustrating? And were you always confident? Did you always know that you'd develop into an all ACC kind of player eventually?
the first part of the question is definitely frustrating. I had, especially coming in as a recruit, I had a lot of expectation, not so much from outside, but from myself and the coaching staff. And I wanted to perform, and I wanted to have a bigger role in my freshman year. There's no doubt about that. But, it's happened at other points in my career where there's been, I haven't, played up to the level that I wanted, or the opportunity wasn't there or whatever. And to me, it's just all part of the process of, how I ended up ending my career. So I was happy with how, like you said, how I ended my career. And, I've had setbacks in the NBA as well. And it's just all part of growing.
What's your favorite memory from Duke? Game memory or a practice or something like that?
I have a lot of good memories. I think, kind of the way everybody wants to end their career on a high note, winning. But when we lost to Louisville in the Elite Eight, it was kind of like, as disappointing as it was, I remember, I just felt like I had done everything that I could do, in my time there. And it was kind of, I remember I was in tears, I was emotional, but I really felt like I couldn't have given any more. So it was, in that sense, it was like a rewarding moment, because, I thank the staff and I thank my teammates, but I really felt good about how I left and what I gave to the program and what they gave to me. But I wouldn't have, other than winning the championship itself, I felt like it was a good ending to my career there.
Yeah, you were Duke's leading scorer and leading rebounder in that game, so you certainly went out on a high. I want to ask you about another memory from your time. 2012, Austin Rivers takes that shot that beats UNC at the Dean Dome. And if you slow down the ESPN video of that, we can see you starting to celebrate as the ball is still in the air. It hasn't even gone in the hoop yet, and you already know that it's going in. Describe that moment, and how did you know the shot was good?
Austin's one of those players where you just know that he's dreamed of big shots and big moments. So we had some tough games that year, and I just felt like we were due for one. It looked good coming off his hand. I'll say I was like, as he was letting the clock wind down, I was like, he's not driving it, so he's got to be pulling up for a jump shot. And I was like, he better hit it. But when he let it go, it looked good, and I just felt like we were due for a big shot. We had, what's crazy? We had a lot of big shots that year. Tyler Thornton hit some big threes in Maui to beat Kansas, who ended up playing chip. Like, we had, our record was probably better than it should have been in the regular season, because we had some guys just make huge plays, and that was one of them by Austin.
Yeah, I'll take it. I don't mind that at all. Hey, I want to ask you, on a slightly more serious note, I'm not sure how much you followed the story recently about the scandal involving Adidas and Louisville and high school players getting paid by shoe companies, and it's been a fairly large scandal for the NCAA, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about. Do you have any thoughts, any feelings about the whole amateur model and the one and done rule and all the ways that kids move from high school to college to the NBA? Do you think the system's broken? Does it work for you? Any thoughts on it?
My biggest thought would be, well, first of all, from going through the experience, there's more. They may have caught a couple people. There's a lot more than what's been caught. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. But, I heard one person make the argument, it's like, AAU coaches or shoe brands or different people are benefiting off of the athlete. It's not too terribly different than the NCAA. They're making an incredible amount of money off of, the TV contracts, the merchandise sales, the whatever. So there are a lot of people benefiting from the product of sport, and I think it is. Well, to me, it's very wrong to be manipulating where kids end up going to school, but once they decide their school, then the NCAA is benefiting from them. So And don't get me, look, I'm very eternally grateful that I had college paid for 4 years, that I get a degree. I'm not downplaying that at all, but if you look at it from a pure business standpoint, I don't know if a scholarship is the exact worth of some of these college athletes and what they're driving to their schools.
I know you didn't. I'm guessing. Did you consider being one and done? What's your feeling about the one and done rule?
Well, if I averaged more than 50 points, I maybe would have considered it a little more. I think if kids are ready, they should let them go to the NBA. I know they instituted the rule because they're worried about the Indy Ebbies of the world and the guys who Jonathan Bender, I don't know, some of the guys who weren't great, Tracy McGrady or LeBron James. But the reality is, you make the 1 year rule, and you have kids that are going to school for a year, and then they're coming out and they're still not ready. So, whenever you make it the rule for, people are going to come out that are ready or aren't ready, and at the end of the day, that's on them. The only reason I see the rule being good is because sometimes these kids have family pressure, or other people that need them to. They just look at them as the athlete or the kid as a payday, and they may force them to go before they're ready. So in that scenario, I think it's good to have the 1 year rule. But some of these, the one thing about the 1 year rule is, when these kids know they're one and done, they stop going to class in December. They'll do the first semester. They'll play basketball. They'll keep their grades up. But once January comes, it doesn't matter if they're going to class or not anyway, because they're leaving in the end of March. So I think they should do away with it. I mean, you got some kids going overseas now to avoid college, and I just don't think that it's needed anymore.
Yeah. It's hard not to see the system and say that it's broken, and the solutions are tough. Hey, last question for you, and thanks so much. You've been great. This has been a ton of fun. We ask this of every former Duke player that we get on the podcast. We've had a few, and we've gotten some really good ones, so the bar is high. My question for you is going to be your favorite crazy, weird Coach K story. And I have to tell you, we've gotten stories about Coach K pulling out a samurai sword. We've got some crazy stories about him talking about being a little Polish boy and just wanting, the team to do something good for this little Polish boy. So blow my socks off. See if you can come up with a really good story. Tell me your favorite Coach K story.
I think he would laugh. The thing is, I gotta think about what I tell you. I think he would laugh if I shared this story with you. So you'll have to check with him. But I remember I was meeting with him. I think it was between my sophomore and junior year. I was thinking about coming out and going to the NBA. I was on some draft boards in the first round, and we had a meeting. And I remember it was super early in the morning, and he made me wait in the room for a little bit. Just he's very calculated, so he knows what he's doing. But anyway, we get in there, and he kind of wanted to understand what's my motivation for leaving. He didn't think I was ready to leave, and he's like, "Why are you doing this?" And he was like, "Is it about the money?" And I was like, my parents do well. It's my decision's not financially motivated or whatever. And he was like, "Do you want to make money?" And I was like, "No, it's not about that." And he was like, "I wish you wanted to make a lot of money." He's like, if you wanted to make a lot of money, then you'd come back to school and I'd teach you how to be a good player that can make a lot of money. And it was kind of like I kind of tried to remove the money from it. And he was like, "I wish you wanted to make a lot of money because we could do this together." And I was like, all right, well, it was like one of those things where you never want to admit that it's about the money. But I'm like, hey, these guys, a first round pick is making over $1 million a year. So I don't know if that rivals any of the best stories, but his delivery of it was a little better than mine.
No. That's not bad at all. And I like that. That's a good rationale. And look, you you came back to school, and by the time you graduated as a senior, I mean, you were a double machine. One of the best centers that Duke has had in many years, and obviously went on to be a first round draft pick, and now you've got this very big contract, that we talked about a little while ago, life changing money. So sounds like Coach K knew what he was talking about, huh?
Yeah, no, he knows. He's been through it with a couple players before, so I took him at his word. And the best thing about me going back to school is I really, I felt like I had a good relationship with him by the time I left, and we still talk even now. So, those last 2 years that I spent there, I really improved as a player, but I really enjoyed working with the staff, my junior and senior year.
Well, congrats again on the 3-year, $41 million contract. If I need a loan, I'm going to come to you, man.
All right, for sure.
Mason Plumlee, thanks again so much for joining us here on the DBR podcast, and good luck this year in Denver. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
So I want to say thanks again to Mason. He was awesome. He was great about this. He even said he would probably come back on or help us to get his brothers on the podcast sometime in the future. So as friends of the podcast go, Mason is way up there. I loved when he talked about how his moment when he came into practice as a rookie, and he didn't even get to be like part of the practice, that like the Nets who had drafted him were loaded with all these all-stars, all these great players, and they didn't even put him on the floor for his first couple practices. And, what an eye-opening experience that was. And I also really enjoyed hearing about the year he was at Duke with both his brothers, with Marshall and Miles, and they would get together and Mason would watch Marshall and Miles play Call of Duty Zombies. A game both my sons love, by the way. Just a great human moment to know what these guys are like and sort of what they do. What were your favorite parts of it?
I those two things were great. I did like us asking him about Austin Rivers' shot and how Mason knew that it was going in before it even went in. And I think the only shame is that there might be even better Coach K stories that we're just not going to ever be able to hear. But I did like him mentioning, as you said, about him being with his brothers at Duke. One of the things that sounded really nice was how, they don't get to see each other a lot during the season, except when their teams are playing each other, but that they all go back to Durham for K Academy every summer, which looks like just an absolute blast to be at.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to see if the K Academy will comp us a couple podcast visits. I would kill to do that, but I don't.
I would not mind, although I actually don't think I would want to participate in the actual basketball.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not good enough. I mean, I play basketball, but I'm not good enough to play at the K Academy.
I do not play basketball, and any of my friends or whoever who are listening, people who know me, know that would just be a bad idea.
Okay, folks. So we do have, well, it's sort of basketball. I guess it's not really basketball news. It's certainly not news about Duke.
It was almost news, you could say.
Yes. A weird kind of thing happened late during the week on Friday, where supposedly we got word from a local reporter that the sanctions against UNC, the report from the NCAA Committee on Infractions, that it was going to be released, and that we were going to finally know, after years and years and years of discussion and investigation and different kinds of reports that said different kinds of things, we were finally going to know what the NCAA was going to do about the decades-long cheating scandal in UNC athletics that tied to the African American Studies Department. And we thought that it was going to be released on Friday. We got this word on Thursday morning from a local reporter who said that it was going to be released on Friday. And then it didn't happen and didn't get released. And the reason it didn't get released was because, at least, and now everyone's speculating. I should start by saying no one knows.
Well,
no one knows for sure. Yeah,
I mean, the story, at least that that I was following made it sound pretty clear, and I think you're about to share the version that I think is the likely explanation.
Right. So supposedly what happened, at least what we can sort of piece together and what reporters have pieced together and things like that, is that the NCAA, the Committee on Infractions, they're supposed to give the school sort of 24 hours heads up. Hey, we're gonna have a report on your infractions in 24 hours. And at some point in that 24 hours, they actually give the school the information before it's released to the public. Now, they could give it to the school like 10 or 15 minutes early, but I think they probably give it to them a few hours early. So apparently UNC heard, okay, we're 24 hours away from releasing it. And UNC went, wait a second, NCAA, we have a huge event planned on Friday, which is the day the NCAA was going to announce this. UNC was kicking off a massive capital campaign. They're raising probably billions of dollars. I haven't really looked into it. I'm sure that
I think the target was like $4.5 billion, which is,
yeah.
If you're a Duke alum or for whatever reason you get the Duke fundraising notifications, the Duke Forward campaign that just finished, wrapped up earlier this year, over the course of like 5 years raised like $3.2 billion, and that was the biggest capital campaign that the university had ever embarked upon.
Right. And when they do these huge capital campaigns, they line up a lot of major donors in advance. They go to people and they go, hey, we're about to do this big thing. We want you to be a part of it. And how, they try and get, at least a partially along the way.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. They get there before they even announce it. And so Carolina had planned a whole weekend of major activities involving their biggest donors, the most important people, the people who are going to give, probably billions of dollars to UNC. And they had this planned for this weekend, for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the notion that the university might be, and look, again, I don't think UNC knows. I don't think anyone outside the Committee on Infractions knows what penalties are coming down. But the notion that you would potentially be hit with huge penalties, that really fly in the face of your academic stature and cripple your athletic programs, perhaps with scholarship reductions, perhaps with national titles taken away, perhaps with future bans on future postseason play. The fact that all that was going to happen literally at the exact same time that Carolina was announcing a massive fundraising effort. I mean, my God, I don't blame UNC for saying, hey, NCAA, can we maybe delay things just a little tiny bit? And the NCAA apparently went, yes, we understand. I mean, look, whether the Committee on Infractions issues their report a few days ago or a few days from now, or heck, even a week from now or 2 weeks from now, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter very much at all. It's still, it's not like there's a UNC team that's playing for a national title tomorrow and the NCAA wasn't going to let them play. And we've 5+ years into this investigation. So taking an extra week or two to allow UNC a takeoff for their major fundraising thing, I think was perfectly fair and perfectly allowable. There are some people who are a little upset about it, but I think it's no big deal. And by the way, there happens to be some speculation out there that if the Committee on Infractions was going to barely slap Carolina on the wrist, that Carolina would have wanted that to be out there before they announced this major campaign. That, like, Carolina would go, oh, we're not getting hit. We're not getting hurt by the Committee on Infractions. Let's announce that almost as part of our fundraising campaign. I actually think, again, and Sam, tell me if you disagree with me, I don't think Carolina has any idea what the Committee on Infractions is going to say.
No, I think that in general, you just don't want these two things happening at the same time. And the way that I followed the story was that the NCAA kind of notified the appropriate parties about the coming information, and then it took UNC maybe a couple hours to be like, wait a minute, no, we can't do that. Or like the right people all got on the phone and changed their minds about the timing of all this release. And I think that's fine. UNC is not just, we we are here to talk about sports, but these schools are all massive institutions that have lots of different things going on. And athletics is certainly a major part of it for both of our schools, but I can understand how they wouldn't want the athletics news to be anywhere near the fundraising news. And I also don't think that they know what's about to happen. I think they may have an idea. They certainly had to appear before the infractions committee and all that kind of jazz. But as far as like what the actual sanctions are going to be, I don't think anyone outside the NCAA knows, because if they did, there would be leaks about it, and we would know, because that's not an organization, I think, that keeps its dealings very close to the vest if they if the story is worth getting out. That being said, I think were you asking what do I think is going to happen when the sanctions come out?
So I was going to say, I mean, we've told everyone everything we know and everything we can speculate about, except for it's time to guess. So Sam, I would like you now, because I think that by the time we record another I think our next podcast could very likely be an emergency podcast right after the Carolina sanctions are announced, if there are any sanctions. I mean, look, there's still a possibility the Committee on Infractions will say, oh no, we're not doing anything. I think it's highly unlikely, but it's a possibility. So I think this is our moment, Sam. We are right here. We got this weird, rare glimpse into the timetable, and my bet is it'll be in the next couple of days. We're recording this Sunday afternoon, the 8th of October. I won't be surprised if Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. That'd be my bet. In fact, I sort of think it'd be Friday. They were going to do it Friday last week. I think they'll do it Friday this week.
And that's usually how these things go. They want to do the data dumps at the end of the week so that people aren't stewing about them during the week, which is fine.
Exactly.
So my official prediction,
yes.
I think that the thing has gone on for a long time, that there's a lot of really bad evidence. But the worst thing, the most damning evidence that came out throughout this whole investigation and this whole scandal were the transcripts from 2004. And I think that is going to ultimately is going to force the NCAA to take UNC's 2005 championship banner down. I think that's going to be the worst of it. There will probably also be scholarship reductions and playoff bans like going forward that'll last, for 2-3 years maybe before they come back. Roy Williams is still going to keep his job. All the important players at UNC will probably stick around. Although if they get a long enough postseason ban, I guess they would be given the right to transfer. But I think the worst thing that happens is that they're going to invalidate that 2005 season. And I don't say that lightly, because in all the years of NCAA infractions and rules violations, I don't think a football or basketball team has ever had to vacate a national championship. Is that right?
That's correct. Although I think Louisville is facing that.
Louisville's probably so. Yeah, my opinion on all this is that UNC is going to be the first team to lose a title, and that Louisville is going to be the second. But that one won't come for some time. I mean, the Rick Pitino sounds like is going to get into a legal fight with the university, and I bet that they won't solve any of the sort of NCAA issues. Which, as a standard reminder, all those NCAA issues like the banners and the wins and all that stuff is all secondary to the actual legal matters, and it doesn't sound like UNC actually has any legal issues at this point. We're just talking about the sort of sports fan implications. Those things will take a long time to figure out, because they won't touch the sports items until the legal matters are settled up. And I don't think that Rick Pitino wants to lose out on his $40 million buyout just yet. So it'll be a long time before we hear about Louisville sanctions. So my prediction, UNC is going to lose the 2005 banner, but Roy Williams is going to still be there. I think there was some speculation a couple of years ago that he might consider retiring through all of these troubles, but then he's had this great run the last 2 years. It seems like he had, and I think we might be talking about this soon, that they got a commitment recently from a 5-star prospect. Seems like the initial reaction to the sanctions has kind of, even though that they haven't come yet, the reaction has kind of blown over, because UNC has been successful. They've recruited they're starting to recruit top kids again. Now, is that going to take a step back when this next round comes out? Wait and see. But yeah, that is what I think is going to happen. What do you say to that?
I think you're mostly correct. I want to get into some more specifics about exactly what I think the NCAA will end up doing. And by the way, this is not what I'm hoping. This is not sort of Jason's fantasy. This is what I actually think the NCAA is going to decide to do. And by the way, going back to something you were talking about, I didn't want to interrupt you. The Louisville national title is already in danger because of the stripper, and the prostitute thing. The 2013 Louisville title, I think the NCAA has already said that Louisville has to vacate that title, but it's currently under appeal by Louisville. The NCAA, when they handed down the sanctions for the stripper, the prostitute thing, they said that they had to vacate all their wins from like 2010 or 11 to 2014, and that included the national title in 2013.
Yeah.
But again, I think Louisville's appealing, so it's not official yet. And by the way, I think when we get the NCAA sanctions against UNC will also appeal in a very, very big way. Although folks who say they're going to take it to court, I'm not so sure about that. All right, so what do I think NCAA is going to do? First of all, I think it is very, very likely that the NCAA is going to ask UNC to demonstrate sports where players should remain eligible versus sports where players are ineligible. I think that the NCAA is going to say, you guys need to look at transcripts and prove to us what players did not cheat, because I think the cheating is so pervasive. And I think that's going to extend across a wide swath of sports. I suspect that the NCAA is going to say that 4, 5, 6, maybe even as many as 8 or 9 national titles in women's soccer are in danger. And the NCAA is going to ask UNC to look at the transcripts of the players who were on those teams to see whether those players received improper benefits. And I think you said 2005 for basketball. I think 2005 and 2009, both of those are going to be in danger. The NCAA is going to say to UNC, look at the transcripts of the players who were on those teams and tell us whether they had illegal benefits, for signing up for these classes, for taking these classes. And I think football is going to get absolutely hammered. Because I think, even though it looks like basketball, took part in this in a big way, I think football took part in it in a really big way. And I think you could see the NCAA saying, hey, we think 8+ seasons, 10 seasons, who knows how long of UNC football games are all being wiped off the record.
Oh no, what a sterling period of success that they'll have to forget about.
Exactly.
And I say that with total with self-realization of who I am and where I went to school.
Right. And I think that there will be penalties going forward, but they won't be that terrible. My bet is you'll see like maybe a 1-year bowl ban and a 1-year postseason ban for basketball, for football, for women's basketball is going to get hit hard. And for several other UNC sports. In fact, and this may be my fantasy, I sort of feel like it would not be crazy for the NCAA to say every single UNC sport is banned from postseason play for the coming season.
Man,
because it appears, and then they would say to UNC, if you think a sport should be eligible, please appeal and explain why. Go ahead.
I don't know if they have that kind of reach and saying something like
sure
that.
They do.
I feel like
wait. What do you mean they don't? Hold on. Why would the NCAA? The NCAA governs every single one of these sports. Of course, they have that reach.
But the but saying prove to us that everybody is eligible as opposed to we found these ineligible guys and everybody else remains eligible. I think there's there's faulty logic going on there, where they're kind of doing a guilty until proven innocent sort of thing, and that's where UNC would get upset to the point. Like I think that at this point, North Carolina wants this whole story to go away, and they will accept a lot of the sanctions kind of lying down because it's just going to be easier when if the NCAA
Really?
comes
Wait.
in
Hold
and says,
on. I want to talk about that.
Okay.
You really think? I think they are going to be furious. They're going to strenuously appeal. UNC has. I mean, if you look at other programs, it is the degree to which UNC has fought this stuff is almost unprecedented.
Sure.
I mean,
and I think that at a certain point, the NCAA is just not going to let them do that anymore. But that if it goes to the point that you're suggesting, where they're asking UNC to prove that athletes like retroactively were eligible, I'm just not sure that that's kind of like part of Committee on Infractions ability. Maybe it is,
okay,
and maybe they have that kind of authority. And in that case, it's probably one more straw on the camel's back towards the NCAA sort of blowing up their whole current eligibility model and starting over. The way that a lot of this stuff is kind of coming to a head over the basketball, the Adidas scandal.
So maybe I phrased that wrong, and I apologize.
Yeah.
What I really meant by that was, I think the NCAA will say to UNC, we need you to look at transcripts, because the Committee on Infractions doesn't want to be looking at all these transcripts.
Right.
They say to UNC, we need you to look at transcripts, and in classes that, in classes where the players received improper benefits to get into those classes, because remember that the scandal is not that the class itself was unfairly easy, even though everyone knows that, even though the accreditation board has put UNC on accreditation probation because of that, even though that's actually the worst part of the scandal, the NCAA isn't deciding anything about the validity of the lack of education that took place in these classes. The NCAA has said the fact that you place these players into these classes outside of sort of the regular registration process, outside of a process where regular students, had easy access to these classes as well, and that academic tutors and people in the academic advising department were communicating with professors and with Debbie Crowder, who's not a professor, about grades. Those are all improper benefits. So this is an improper benefits thing. This is not a, academic malfeasance thing. But again, I think the NCAA will say to UNC, you need to look at transcripts and you need to tell us who did not get benefits and who did. And if a player got improper benefits, the team, then every time that player competed in a game, that's a that's a forfeited win, or that's a forfeited title, or whatever. I think that's, and I phrased that inarticulately, and I apologize. But I think the NCAA is going to ask UNC, please look at the transcripts and tell us which sports should be eligible and which sports shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked a lot recently about eligibility and all the all these various issues surrounding college sports and college basketball. I think that sort of the future state that I envision coming out of all this is the NCAA being more of a review institution for the purposes of academics, because ultimately college sports, like the players might be able to start getting paid and all these things. And the one thing that is going to remain, and the reason that this UNC scandal has been so terrible relative to a lot of other ones, is that it's related to academics, and that the NCAA will be more focused on the academics, or at least will wield sanction authority over academics more so than it will on agents and shoe money and all that stuff. And that this might be kind of the first example of that future state, although whatever those rules might be aren't in place yet. And I think we're gonna look back on this and realize that this scandal was really different, I think, from a lot of the other ones that have come up recently, like at Louisville, like all the football stuff at Miami, like lots of other programs that have had issues, because this one, uniquely so, was really focused on academics and not on kind of the other sort of normal impermissible benefits.
So I'm going to close off this conversation with one final comment, and I've made this comment. I made this comment on the boards this past week.
Are you gonna worry about Cleveland State's penalty?
No. I do love that joke. A lot of people love to make that joke. No, my comment is this: no matter what the penalties are, there will be a tremendous number of Duke fans, of NC State fans, of Wake Forest fans, people who really feel UNC is their rival, and people who have followed this passionately and who really know about this scandal and everything that went on. The people like that, people like me, people like you.
I was gonna say Jason's id.
Yes. The people like that are going to be incredibly upset at the penalties, because I think there's no way the penalties are going to be as severe as we think they should be. And at the same time, I suspect there'll be another group of people who will be very, very upset. I think that no matter what the penalties are, people from UNC will also be upset. So on both sides, my bet is you will see folks on both sides, both the rivals and the school, who will say, wait a second, this was hugely unfair. And the rivals, we will be saying it's unfair because it wasn't harsh enough, because, to be honest, there are a lot of Duke fans out there, people who followed this, who think Carolina should get the death penalty or Carolina should be on 5 years probation, and just, that this is, one of the worst scandals in NCAA history. And the Carolina folks who have gotten a ton of many doses of PR from their PR firms, who've said they shouldn't be punished at all and nothing bad should happen, and the NCAA has no business legislating this, and UNC has fixed everything that was wrong. And so those folks are going to be upset. If anything happens, they'll be upset as well. And I kind of think that's where things should be. I sort of feel like if the Committee on Infractions can thread that needle and make both sides upset, they probably did their job.
Yep, I totally agree with you on that.
But be prepared when we do our special podcast on it. I will be ranting and raving and probably really upset.
I was going to say, are you going to flip the switch? I
Hey, folks, we want to take a quick time out now and thank Byrd Campbell for sponsoring today's edition of the podcast. Jamie Campbell and Tucker Byrd, both members of the class of 1978 from Duke, diehard Duke fans and followers. After years of being lawyers separately, they decided to partner up and get together. They founded the law firm of Byrd Campbell, which has offices in Dallas, Orlando, and throughout the Gulf Coast of Florida. They've watched and cheered for Duke football and basketball for thousands of games. We urge you to reach out to them for all your legal needs at byrdcampbell.com. That's BYRDCAMPBELL.com. Thanks a lot, guys. Okay, so that's it for basketball stuff. Even though the NCAA conversation, the NCAA sanction conversation wasn't really about basketball and wasn't really about Duke, we're going to get to Duke football. And Sam, I guess we have to talk about the football game that happened against UVA. I will freely admit that I was extremely confident coming into this game. I really thought Duke was going to beat Virginia. I thought it'd be a competitive game. Virginia's not a bad team. They're now 4-1, but they beat Duke 28-21 in a game that featured the first half was the worst half of offense by both teams that I've seen in many, many years.
Well, did you watch the first half of Miami, Florida State?
No, I didn't. Was it just as bad?
Because it might have been as well. Well, it was like both defenses were the Monstars and both offenses were the Looney Tunes.
This was
This was bad. This first half was more. There was more ineptitude and less just like lack of execution. Daniel Jones throwing the ball all over the place and receivers not being where they're supposed to be. All of it was a mess. Sorry if you wanted to round out that thought.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, Duke had a total of 255 yards of offense. 255 yards of offense.
I mean, there's been worse, but that's bad.
Awful. That is really, really bad. And there's no easy way around it. I'm just going to say it. Our passing game is broken. And I mean broken in a big, big way. Like, I really thought Daniel Jones was terrible. But I thought our receivers were even worse.
I think
Chris Taylor there were at least 2 or 3 long balls that Chris Taylor should have. So Daniel Jones, when he threw the ball more than 8 yards downfield, was phenomenally inaccurate. I mean, he was either 5 yards too long or 5 yards too short on all his deep passes, and we threw the ball deep a lot.
Only 2 picks.
But there were a couple times that he actually threw the ball on target, especially to Chris Taylor. And I mean, the ball just went through Chris Taylor's hands a couple times when he had a step on a defender. I mean, it looked like touchdowns to me, or at least like 30, 40-yard gains. It was awful. Our receivers are terrible. And Daniel Jones was so inaccurate. Oh, God. We should have done nothing but rush the ball because, to be honest, Britton Brown and Sean Wilson did a pretty good job. They averaged like 4.5, almost 5 yards a carry between the two of them. Why didn't we just run the ball the whole damn game? Oh,
I don't think I don't think there's an easy solution to it because they averaged 5 yards per rush ish, 4 to 5, not being the focus of the offense. If that had changed, I don't want to know what, that gets worse if they get more carries probably. And if the defense is more focused on them, because Jones threw like 40 sometimes.
42, 14 for 42.
14 for 42. And it was bad. It was bad for him. And like you said, it was bad for the receivers. And doesn't seem like any of them are in sync. I think that the Duke fans got used to just having a good passing game for so many years with Cutcliffe. And it's a little confusing now as to why it's broken down so much. On the other side, I mean, so on offense, it was bad, just basically the entire game. And then it seemed like late in the game, Jones couldn't get protection and the receivers couldn't get open to make all the plays they needed to catch up at the end. But on the other side of the ball, I mean, the defense continues to be very impressive. And if you want to take the two bright spots out of this game, one was generally the defense, but specifically getting the pressure up front. Their UVA's quarterback, Kurt Benkert, really never got into a great rhythm. I mean, he played better than Jones did, but he still didn't have a great game.
Not a high bar. Not a high bar. through two picks. One was a pick 6 by Jeremy McDuffie. Only 182 yards through the air. And Joe Giles Harris had just a monster day. He sacked Benkert once, had 15 total tackles. It was generally good from the defense. And then the other bright spot was that he didn't score a touchdown on the play, but Sean Wilson's kick return in the fourth quarter to set up a Duke rushing touchdown was really nice. And it was nice to see that aspect of the game come back for the Blue Devils, because in years past, I think that they have not relied on the kick returns and the punt returns, but certainly the team has been good in recent years on those return plays. And we hadn't seen much of that this year from Wilson or from TJ Ramming. And Wilson, coming up with that big 70-something yard kick return was a really welcome sign for the special teams unit. I agree. So I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, I'm glad you cited the defense. I thought the defense was excellent. They got a little gassed late in the game. I don't blame
them.
The
offense couldn't stay on the field.
The offense was 3 and out almost every single time. Duke, by the way, stat of the game, Duke's offense didn't convert a single third down in the second half. 0 for whatever it was in the second half, which is just terrible. But the defense is great. I think we've got this is one of the best defenses I've seen from a Duke team, and I've been watching Duke football for 30 plus years. In fact, I mean, it's entirely possible this is the best defense Duke has had since I've been watching Duke play football. I mean, they're really good. They tackle together. They do a fabulous job of getting pressure on the quarterback. I think that we're solid all the way through the secondary, all the way up front. Our defense is good enough for us to be a top 15, maybe even a top 10 team. Our offense is just not there at all. And by the way, you mentioned returns. Did you see how many TJ Ramming? Someone explained to that guy that when the ball gets punted and you're returning a punt, don't let it bounce unless it's bouncing inside the 10. I mean, there were like twice in the first half, he had balls that he let bounce at like the 30 or something like that, and they rolled an extra 10 or 15 yards. Just go fair catch. Just go get it.
Yeah. That aspect of it is frustrating, and I'm surprised they haven't fixed it, because it is one of those things that is easier to fix than a broken passing game where you just need reps and time with all the players that admittedly the coaches don't really have. But with the return game, you would think that stuff would be easier to impart. I don't know. I think that. Go ahead.
I was going to say. I mean, I'm almost laughing now. I mean, we actually discussed the notion of Daniel Jones turning pro early. I mean, Daniel Jones the past couple of weeks he's been the worst quarterback in the ACC. And I want to recognize not all of it is on him. We've talked about the receivers. I think the receivers have been just terrible. But
I think the O-line isn't quite as experienced and is probably still getting a little bit of their footing. There are definitely times when Jones gets either moved out of the pocket or sacked, faster than he's even anticipating. Although some of that is on him to just have more awareness of, especially on his blind side, of those defenders getting around our O-line and getting to him.
Yeah. So a couple things I'm looking forward to that I would love to see Duke. I would love to see start to happen for Duke right away next week against Florida State. First one is I think Britton Brown and Sean Wilson need to carry the ball more than 17 times combined. Britton Brown, who I highlighted very, very early on this season, looked really good on a few of his runs yesterday. He only got 10 carries, but he gained 54 yards. The guy's ripping off 5+ yards a carry. Get him the ball more than 10 times, please. And Sean Wilson only had 7 carries. I mean, I don't get that. I mean, the guy is a senior workhorse for us. That two-headed running back monster of Britton Brown and Sean Wilson needs to get more than 17 carries. And I'll tell you the other one. Sam, you remember I highlighted this guy on the podcast a week ago. I said Scotty Bracey. I wanted to see more of Scotty Bracey. He is a redshirt freshman, a great, amazing athlete who's playing wide receiver for Duke. Now, he's not a very experienced wide receiver. He did not play wide receiver for his high school team. So he's still learning a lot, although I expect he spent all of last year learning how to play wide receiver. But I think that guy could really be something special, and I'd love to see Duke. They got him the ball twice when Duke was making a late drive, a late attempt to tie up the football game, and then Daniel Jones took a couple sacks and made a couple bad throws, and the game was over. But they started to work Scotty Bracey in there late in the game, and I want to see more of him because Jonathan Lloyd and TJ Ramming and Taylor are they're nice guys. They're working hard, but they're not getting it done. And I'd love to see us find someone else who can get it done. And I think Scotty Bracey could be that.
I think that the focus on the running game is going to be the more near-term solution if the Duke offense is going to catch up to the defense at all. But yeah, I mean, the development of those younger guys is going to be essential probably later in the season or in the years, going forward.
But if we're talking about what's looking ahead, we got to talk a little bit about Florida State. That's who Duke has next on the schedule. The Blue Devils are now 4-2. And I would have bet a lot of money that Florida State would have a better record than Duke, but Florida State is 1-3. Their schedule is a little screwy because they missed some games thanks to hurricanes earlier this year, and those games are being made up and moved around and other stuff like that. But they've only played 4 games, even though Duke has already played 6. But Duke has Florida State coming up this weekend. Sam, have you looked at the Seminoles a little bit? What do we expect from them?
Yeah, so the Florida State team that is showing up in Durham this week is probably the worst one that has ever played under Jimbo Fisher. Don't have, don't take that as a sign that you should be throwing money on the Blue Devils. I would say that, like you mentioned, they had to deal with the hurricane. They've had a lot of different annoying circumstances around the program, but most specifically the hurricane throwing the schedule off and their week 1 loss to Alabama, which was kind of bad in its own right for, just being not the way that you want to start the season by getting, the runaround by another top team. But in that game, they lost their returning starting quarterback, DeAndre Francois, who was pretty good for them previously. And in his place, they're starting freshman quarterback James Blackman, who, if you've
true
watched
freshman,
the Seminoles,
not a freshman, a true freshman, and he wasn't that highly regarded, by the way. He's not a superstar recruit. He was only a 3-star recruit.
He's one of these guys who came out of high school and isn't quite. He's a great example of why people redshirt, because he's just not ACC football size yet. He's very skinny. And he's really athletic. He's made a few big plays for them this year, but overall you can tell that there's just a lack of experience, and he doesn't quite have that awareness that recent Florida State quarterbacks have had. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that Jameis Winston was there and was wowing everybody around the field. Francois had a good season last year, not anything spectacular, but Blackman, and this is most I would imagine to him being a freshman, is just really behind the curve on that. And Florida State probably expected more out, or they did expect more out of the quarterback position this year. And I think that has affected the team kind of across the board. The wide receivers who are athletic can't really get open. They've had to put more weight on their dual rushing attack of Jock Patrick and Cam Akers, the latter of whom is also a freshman. So they have young guys in important positions. And I should say that Patrick and Akers have been effective runners. They haven't been, all conference runners. So nothing on the Florida State offense has really clicked yet. And they're only scoring like 18 points a game or so. Now, granted, they have played a tough schedule.
Very tough schedule.
They had to play Miami this week, who it seems like is turning out to be the second best team in the conference and is probably on their way to winning the Coastal and getting the opportunity to lose to Clemson in the ACC championship game. But, playing a team with that description is not something that should scare Florida State. And Miami looked more athletic than them and more prepared from them this past week. So on the offensive side,
it took a last second touchdown pass for Miami to win that game.
Right. But I mean, if you were watching the game, there was I at least had the impression that Miami was kind of dominating Florida State, like around the field. They made mistakes, which Miami always seems to do. but Miami looked like the better team yesterday. Now that's Florida State on offense. Florida State on defense, still really great. And I think that the kind of underrated national thing about Florida State the last few years under Jimbo Fisher, where they have been so dominant, is not just that the offense is good, but that the defense has been elite every season. They have, especially the defensive backs, just smother receivers, smother the passing game. And so going back to talking about how Duke's real weakness has been the passing game this year, and Florida State's defense, I think that their strongest aspect is in that defensive back area where they limit receivers, they bottle them up. I expect that there will be a drastically different game plan against them, because we're going to have to lean on the running backs a lot more to make plays. And I don't think there's a problem with Daniel Jones also being really involved with the running game. I think that he's proven that he's at least a capable runner. His decision making has been suspect recently, but if you have him as an option and you have the other two guys, they can put up a fight against Florida State. I don't think that Duke is going to win, even though the game is in Wallace Wade Stadium. But Florida State is not the vintage Florida State that we have seen the last few years. And so Duke can keep it close against them. They don't have to do a ton on offense to counter Florida State, especially as well as the Duke defense is playing. So yeah, like I said, I don't expect Duke to beat Florida State. I do think that they will be able to keep it close. The one thing that is going to be I think the biggest challenge for Duke, even though James Blackman hasn't had the best season, they have one big wide receiver, Auden Tate, who's been really fantastic for them. And
he has 4 touchdowns on the season already.
I'm not sure how Duke's going to plan to cover him, because it's him and then a handful of other guys who have had decent receiving seasons, not outstanding. So between Tate and then the 2 running backs, those are the guys you really have to watch. And Duke only has one Joe Giles Harris and one Ben Humphreys, and neither of those guys is going to be able to get out wide on Tate. And I don't think that any of the corners this year for Duke have been particularly excellent on that corner coverage, especially on the deep ball. We saw that against North Carolina, and so maybe they let Tate rip off a couple big plays and try to deal with everything else. But I think that if Duke gets if Duke does not perform well, if they get beat by 2 touchdowns or something, or 3 touchdowns, I think that'll be on the back of that one really big wide receiver. And then the other problem, of course, is Florida State's secondary. Daniel Jones has to be careful with the ball. He threw a pick 6 against Virginia. He's got to be more careful with the ball against Florida State because they are, a very opportunistic defense.
So I had a bunch of notes, and you said everything I had in my notes. So I don't have that much to add. One little thing I'll add. Folks should note the kicker for Florida State is Ricky Aguayo, and you don't need to go to Google. I will tell you right now, he is in fact the younger brother of former All-American Roberto Aguayo, who famously went to Tampa Bay. Was I think a 3rd round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is
and has not been good.
No, he was cut. He is no longer kicking for Tampa Bay. But Roberto Aguayo was
don't draft kickers.
Yeah, Roberto Aguayo was about as good a college football kicker as there is, and his younger brother Ricky is also quite good at kicking. Don't be surprised if Florida State at some point lines up to take a 50+ yard field goal and makes it, because Ricky Aguayo is absolutely capable of doing that kind of thing. He's very, very good place kicker, and that obviously gives Florida State an advantage on Duke. You mentioned
it's a strange thing for a program that's as consistently good as Florida State to have a good kicking game, but Jimbo Fisher seems to have found the secret sauce in the Aguayo family.
There you go. I don't know if there are any additional Aguayo children, but my bet is they also kick. But in any event, you were saying, if someone, this could happen where Florida State or someone could jump out to a 2 or 3 touchdown lead. I think this is going to be a low scoring game.
It should be.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that both defenses are the strong points of these two teams. And you also identified, to me, what I think the biggest matchup is going to be, which is going to be Duke's rushing attack against the Florida State rushing defense. Florida State is very, very good. It only gives up 115 yards on the ground per game, which is not a lot. Duke averages more than 200 yards rushing a game. So between the immovable force and the I can't even believe I blew that line.
It's the immovable object and the unstoppable force.
That's what I meant to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I muddled them together.
I'm here for your idioms.
Thank you so much. Between the Duke rushing attack and the Florida State rushing defense, one of them is going to have to give. I really hope that it'll be the Florida State rushing defense, because if Duke can, I'll say right now, if Duke can rip off more than 130, 150 yards on the ground, I think we'll be in good shape in this game. 150, that's my number. If we're less than 150, I think we're going to be in real trouble, because I just can't imagine that we're going to, get a lot of yards in the air. You were very correct in pointing out the Florida State defensive backs are way, way better than the Duke receivers.
And and that's been like their best positional group the last few years.
Yeah, and it continues to be very strong for them.
The whole thing, yeah.
Okay, so it's time for parting shots, and I will let you lead it off, Sam. What you got for me? How you wrapping up the podcast?
So I have mentioned baseball a handful of times in recent weeks on the show. I think everybody knows that I'm a big baseball fan, and so I'm watching all the Duke games. I'm following all the Duke news. But for the month of October, as long as it lasts, I have to stress watch all the Washington Nationals games, and they pulled out a surprise come from behind victory yesterday against the Cubs. So that was exciting, and if you're watching the playoffs, I don't know, baseball playoffs are so much. I feel like they're so much more stressful than all the other sports, because there's like when you watch a basketball playoff game, there's a time limit. There's only so much time that they can spend going back and forth. But in baseball, it's like every out you have to be counting and everything. So pardon me if I'm off my game for the next few weeks. Hopefully it means that the Nationals have continued to win games in surprising fashion and advance.
So for my parting shot, folks, if you have not seen it yet, you absolutely must see the play-by-play call from the Toledo Eastern Michigan game. And you may be saying to yourself, good God, Jason, why are you talking about a Toledo Eastern Michigan game? I would like to submit that Jay Feely, former NFL kicker, you should recognize his name, Jay Feely's call of the Toledo Eastern Michigan game is the worst announcing I have ever seen or heard in my life. The Eastern Michigan kicker lines up to take a field goal. Now, Jay Feely is a former NFL kicker. He kicked in the NFL for decades, I think. He should know whether or not a field goal is good. I have never in my life attempted to kick a football through the uprights, and I can tell just by watching whether or not a field goal is good. So Paulie Fricano, the kicker, kicks this ball, and it misses. Now, it doesn't miss by a little bit. It misses by a lot. Literally, the moment it leaves his foot, you can tell this thing is going to peel off to the left. Like, it misses by 10 yards at least.
I was going to say,
right?
It's almost the width of the uprights away from the uprights.
Like, yeah, if they'd taken the uprights,
I suppose the length of the crossbar.
If they had taken the field goal thing and moved it 10 yards, maybe Paulie Fricano's kick would have been good. But Jay Feely, who is doing the color commentary, says, and it's off the crossbar, barely had enough, and he knocked it through. Great kick. And the score is now 3-3. He misses this kick so badly. Jay Feely misses the call almost as badly as the guy misses the kick. It's incredible. And the poor guy, Jay Feely's doing color, the poor play-by-play announcer doesn't say anything. I think the guy was so stunned he didn't know what to say. It's hysterical.
I've actually seen this happen before, not this egregiously, but the lesson here is that when you are a football commentator and you are, their seats are usually like on the 50-yard line up high, so they have a nice view of the game, like kind of the same way that we do when we're watching sort of the normal view on TV. It's not a good view for seeing the angle on the kicks. And,
exactly. Watch your monitor. Watch the monitor.
The lesson for the commentators is watch the monitor on the kicks, because nothing otherwise is interesting happening on the kick other than whether it's going in. And if it gets blocked, you'll know it got blocked. So just watch the monitor and call it that way. I mean, football is I think tough to watch in some ways, because you have to have cameras all over the place to get the right view of, balls getting caught and guys stepping on the sidelines or getting into the end zone, all that stuff. But this was like the most egregious version of it I've ever seen.
Oh, it's bad. We'll post something in the thread.
Yeah, definitely post a link to the.
I will post a link because it's too funny.
Watching it was intoxicating. I think I watched the clip like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, you're like, what how did he see it that way? But you're right. I'm sure it was he had a bad angle.
Oh, it was so bad.
Hey, and one other quick thing I wanted to mention, I saw an interesting tweet from Jeff Goodman, who was he was at Duke for media day, I'm sure. So this is about a week old, forgive me. But Jeff Goodman went to the Duke store and he was looking around to see what jerseys were for sale. And he noted that there were no number 35 jerseys from Marvin Bagley were available for sale. And he said it's because Marvin Bagley committed so late that Duke doesn't have Marvin Bagley. They don't have number 35s available in the Duke store.
Does Duke normally have freshman jerseys available at the beginning of the season? I feel like that just wasn't a thing previously, but with the relatively recent one and done explosion at Duke, maybe that's changed.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
My bet is that, I bet they had a jersey available for Jason Tatum last year and Harry Giles, don't you think?
Yeah. If you were, let us know if you were at Duke. 'Cause I'm curious about this. If you were at Duke the last couple of years, not if they were selling them at the end of the season, because I would guess that Nike would get them to them by spring semester, but in the fall, I'm talking September, October preseason, were there number 0 current jerseys in the store?
So actually, the Jeff Goodman tweet noted that he was looking at a Grayson Allen and a Trevon Duval jersey. So
right, but Duval's wearing what? Duval's wearing number 5 though, isn't he?
Yes, correct.
And
you think they have that for William Avery? Wait,
no. There were other recent players who have worn number 5 who were good. I don't know if Jeff Goodman is as clued into what the current jersey design is. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I know that. So I came to Duke in 2007. Greg Paulus was 2 years ahead of me. They were still selling old Greg Paulus jerseys after I graduated. They were still in the store. So
they didn't say Paulus.
I know that stuff. No, they didn't say Paulus on them, but also the Trayvon Duval jerseys don't say Duval on them. So
right, exactly. You're not allowed to have names on the jerseys because the NCAA is silly and stupid and doesn't make any sense.
All of those things.
But the reason I brought it up is they are not there now. I will go on the record to make a prediction that by the time Christmas rolls around, there will be plenty of number 35 Duke jerseys available, and I bet there'll be a lot of people who want to buy them. This guy's going to be really, really special.
Let us hope that is the case.
Yes. So that's going to wrap it up for us here on episode number 87 of the DBR podcast. Sam, thanks for joining me. Donald, root Team USA on to victory down there in Trinidad and Tobago.
He did a great job the other day against Panama. Yeah,
huge win, 4-0, big win.
Great win.
Yeah, and they took care of business early in that game. I love watching World Cup qualifying soccer. There's so much tension involved. So anyway, Donald's having fun. Sam and I are minding the store. Folks, we'll be back with you next weekend, about a week from now, unless there is cause for an emergency podcast.
We will be back whenever we need to be.
There you go. I think that is the appropriate answer.
All right.
Thanks a lot, folks. And Duke Band, take us home.